Monica said, I'm satisfied with what I know already, Miss Cargill, about you, Miss Cargill says. But I was very lovely then, Gomez says. We are sure of that. You're so lovely now that we can well imagine you at what age were you? Miss Cargill says, just 18. Lord Cliverton says, now Michael, Senor Gomez says, he has told you his story. Did he include the fact that he served a term in prison? Well, it should matter more what one's done rather than if one served time or not, but Michael said, he told me everything. It was his experience with you that made him so understanding of my predicament. Lord Cliverton says, it made him invent the position which he'd come to find the man for. Michael says, I don't care about that. He's offered me the job. With a jolly good screw, I'm sure he means a hook, and some pickings in commission. He's made a fortune there. San Marco for me. Lord Cliverton says, and what are your duties to be? Do you know? Michael says, we didn't go into details. There's some time for that later. Gomez says, much better to wait until we get there. The nature of business in San Marco is easier explained in San Marco than in England. Lord Cliverton says, perhaps you intended to change your name to Gomez. Gomez says, oh no, Dick. There are plenty of other good names. Monica says, Michael, you can't abandon your family and your very self. It's a kind of suicide. Charles says, Michael, you think Senor Gomez is inspired by benevolence. Michael says, I told you he'd come to London looking for a man for an important post on his staff. Charles says, a post the nature of which is left very vague. Michael says, it's confidential, I tell you. Charles says, so I can imagine. Highly confidential. Gomez says, be careful, Mr. Barrister. You ought to know something about the law of slander. Here's Miss Cargill, a reliable witness, Charles says. I know enough about the law of libel and slander to know that you are hardly likely to invoke it. And, Michael, here's another point to think of. Senor Gomez has offered you a post in San Marco. Senor Gomez pays your passage. Michael says, an advance of salary. Charles says, Senor Gomez pays your passage. Gomez says, just as many years ago his father paid mine. Charles says, this return of past kindness no doubt gives you pleasure. Gomez says, yes, it's always pleasant to repay an old debt, and better late than never. Charles says, I see your point of view. Can you really feel confidence, Michael, in a man who aims to gratify, through you, his lifelong grievance against your father? Remember, you put yourself completely in the power of a man you don't know, of the nature of whose business you know nothing. All you can be sure of is that he served a prison sentence for forgery. Gomez says, well, Michael, what do you say to all this? Michael says, I'll say that Hemington has plenty of cheek, Senor Gomez, and I've talked things over, Hemington. Gomez says, as two men of the world, we discussed things very frankly, and I can tell you, Michael's head is well screwed on, and he's got brains, he's got flair. When he does come back, he'll be able to buy you out many times over. Miss Cargill says, Richard, I think it's time I joined the conversation. My late husband, Mr. Cargill, was a businessman. I wish you could have known him, Senor Gomez. You're very much alike in some ways, so I understand business, Miss Cargill. Mr. Cargill told me so. Now, Michael has some great abilities for business. I saw that, and so does Senor Gomez. He's simply been suffering, poor boy, from frustration. He's been waiting all this time for the opportunity to make use of his gifts. And now, opportunity has come knocking at the door. Richard, you must not bar his way. That would be shameful. Lord Cliverton says, I cannot bar his way. As you know very well, Michael's a free agent, if he so chooses, to place himself in your power, Fred Culverwell, of his own volition, to contract his enslavement. I cannot prevent him. I have something to say to you, Michael, before you go. I shall never repudiate you, though you repudiate me. I see now clearly the many, many mistakes I've made my whole life through, mistake upon mistake, the mistaken attempts to correct mistakes by methods which proved to be equally mistaken. I see that your mother and I, in our failure to understand each other, both misunderstood you in our divergent ways. When I think of your childhood, when I think of the happy little boy who was Michael, when I think of your boyhood and adolescence, and see how all the efforts aimed at your good only succeeded in defeating each other, how can I feel anything but sorrow and compunction? Monica says, "Oh, Michael, remember, you're my only brother, and I'm your only sister. You never took so much notice of me. When we were growing up, we seldom had the same friends. I took all that for granted, so I didn't know till now how much it means to me to have a brother." Michael says, "Why, of course, Monica. You know I'm very fond of you, though we never really seemed to have much in common. I remember when I came home for the holidays, how it used to get on my nerves when I saw you, always sitting there with your nose in a book. And once Monica snatched a book away from you and tossed it into the fire. How I laughed. You never seemed even to want a flirtation. And my friends used to chaff me about my highbrow sister. But all the same, I was fond of you, and always shall be. We don't meet often, but if we're fond of each other, that needn't interfere with your life or mine." Monica says, "Oh, Michael, you haven't understood a single word of what I said. You must make your own life, of course, just as I must make mine. It's not a question of your going abroad, but a question of the spirit which inspired your decision. If you wish to renounce your father and your family, what is left between you and me?" Michael says, "That makes no difference. You'll be seeing me again." And let's remember, it's not so much the who you do business with as what sort of business you're doing. Bill says, "That makes no difference. You'll be seeing me again." Monica says, "But who will you be when I see you again? Whoever you are then, I shall always pretend that it is the same Michael," Charles says. "And when do you leave England?" Michael says, "When we can get a passage, and I must buy my kit. We were just going up to London. Senor Gomez will attend to my needs for that climate. And you see, he has friends in the shipping line who thinks he can be helpful in getting reservations." Miss Cargill says, "It's wonderful, Senor Gomez, how you manage everything. No sooner had I put my proposal before him, and he had it all planned out. It was really an inspiration on my part, I mean. Are you listening to me, Richard? You look very distrait. You ought to be excited." Lord Cliverton says, "Is this goodbye, then, Michael?" Michael says, "Well, that just depends. I could look in again, if there's any point in it. Personally, I think that when one's come to a decision, as well as to say goodbye at once, and be done with it." Lord Cliverton says, "Yes, if you're going, and I see no way to stop you, then I agree with you, the sooner the better. We may never meet again, Michael." Michael says, "I don't see why not." Gomez says, "At the end of 5 years, he will get his first leave." Michael says, "Well, there's nothing more to say, is there?" Lord Cliverton says, "Nothing at all." Michael says, "Then we might as well be going." Gomez says, "Yes, we might as well be going. You'll be grateful to me in the end, Dick." Miss Cargill says, "A parent isn't always the right person, Richard, to solve a son's problem. Sometimes an outsider, a friend of the family, can see more clearly." Gomez says, "Not that I deserve any credit for it. We can only regard it as a stroke of good fortune that I came to England at the very moment when I could be helpful." Miss Cargill says, "It's truly providential." Monica says, "Goodbye, Michael. Will you let me write to you?" Gomez says, "Oh, I'm glad you reminded me. Here's my business card with the full address. You can always reach him there, but it takes some days, you know, even by airmail." Monica says, "Take the card, Charles, if I write to you, Michael. Will you ever answer?" Michael says, "Oh, of course, Monica. You know, I'm not much of a correspondent, but I'll send you a card, now and again, just to let you know I'm flourishing. Lord Claverton says, yes, write to Monica. Gomez says, well, goodbye, Dick, and goodbye, Monica. Goodbye, Mr. Hemington, Monica says. Goodbye, Michael. And Michael and Gomez exit, and Miss Cargill says, I'm afraid this seems awfully sudden to you, Richard. It isn't so sudden. We talked it all over. But I've got a little piece of news of my own. Next autumn, I'm going out to Australia. On my doctor's advice, and on my way back, Senor Gomez has invited me to visit San Marco. I'm so excited, but what pleases me most is that I shall be able to bring you news of Michael. And now that we've found each other again, we must always keep in touch, but you better rest now. You're looking rather tired. I'll run and see them off. Miss Cargill exits, and Monica says, oh, Father, Father, I'm so sorry, but perhaps, Michael may learn his lesson. I believe he'll come back. If it's all a failure, homesickness, I'm sure, will bring him back to us. If he prospers, that will give him confidence. It's only self-confidence that Michael is lacking. Oh, Father, it's not you and me he rejects, but himself, the unhappy self that he's ashamed of. I'm sure he loves us. Lord Claverton says, Monica, my dear, what you say comes home to me. I fear for Michael. Nevertheless, you're right to hope for something better. And when he comes back, if he does come back, I know that you and Charles will do what you can to make him feel that he's not estranged from you. Charles says, we will indeed. We shall be ready to welcome him and give all the aid we can to him. But it's both of you together. Make the force to attract him. You and Monica combined. Lord Claverton says, I shall not be here. You heard me say to him that this might be a final goodbye. I am sure of it now. Perhaps it is as well. Monica says, what do you mean, Father? You'll be here to greet him. But one thing I'm convinced of, you must leave Badgley Court. Charles says, Monica is right. You should leave. Lord Claverton says, this may surprise you. I feel at peace now. It is the peace that ensues upon contrition, when contrition ensues upon knowledge of the truth. Why did I always want to dominate my children? Why did I mark out a narrow path for Michael? Because I wanted to perpetuate myself in him. Well, a straight and narrow path is okay as long as people are allowed their own personality and stuff. Why did I want to keep you to myself, Monica? Because I wanted you to give your life to adoring the man that I pretended to myself that I was, so that I could believe in my own pretenses. I've only just now had the illumination of knowing what love is. We all think we know, but how few of us do. And now I feel happy in spite of everything, in defiance of reason. I've been brushed by the wing of happiness, and I'm happy, Monica, that you have found a man whom you can love for the man he really is. Monica says, oh, Father, I've always loved you, but I love you more since I've come to know you here at Badgley Court, and I love you the more because I love Charles. Lord Claverton says, yes, my dear, your love is for the real Charles, not a make-believe, as was your love for me. Monica says, but now, Father, it's the real you I love, the man you are, not the man I thought you were. Lord Claverton says, and Michael, I love him even for rejecting me. For the me he rejected, I reject also. I've been freed from the self that pretends to be someone, and in becoming no one, I begin to live. It is worthwhile dying to find out what life is, and I love you, my daughter, the more truly for knowing that there is someone you love more than your father, that you love and are loved. And now that I love Michael, I think for the first time, remember, my dear, I am only a beginner in the practice of loving. Well, that is something. I shall leave you for a while. This is your first visit to us at Badgley Court, Charles says, and not at all what you were expecting. I'm sorry you've had to see so much of persons and situations not very agreeable. You two ought to have a little time together. I'll leave Monica to you. Look after her, Charles. Now and always. I shall take a stroll. Monica says, at this time of day? You'll not go far, will you? You know you're not allowed to stop out late at this season? It's chilly at dusk. Lord Claverton says, Yes, it's chilly at dusk, but I'll be warm enough. I shall not go far. And Claverton exits. Charles says, He's a very different man from the man he used to be. It's as if he passed through some door unseen by us, and had turned and was looking back at us with a glance of farewell. Well, we each go through these stages in life that give us an opportunity. You can say at least there's 7 stages of the psychology. And Monica says, I can't understand this. His going for a walk. Charles says, he wanted to leave us alone together. Monica says, yes, he wanted to leave us alone together. And yet, Charles, though, we've been alone today, only a few minutes. I felt all the time. Charles says, I know what you're going to say. We were alone together in some mysterious fashion, even with Michael. And despite those people, because somehow we've begun to belong together, and that awareness, Monica says, was a shield protecting both of us. Charles says, so that now we are conscious of a new person, who is you and me together. Oh, my dear, I love you to the limits of speech and beyond. It's strange that words are so inadequate, yet, like the asthmatic struggle for breath, so the lover must struggle for words. Monica says, I loved you from the beginning of the world. Before you and I were born, the love was always there that brought us together. Oh, Father, Father, I could speak to you now. Charles says, let me go and find him. Monica says, we will go to him together. He is close at hand, though he has gone too far to return to us. He is under the beech tree. It is quiet and cold there. In becoming no one, he has become himself. He is only my father now, and Michael's, and I am happy. Isn't it strange, Charles, to be happy at this moment? Charles says, it is not at all strange. The dead has poured out a blessing on the living. Monica says, age and decrepitude have no terrors for me. Loss and vicissitude cannot appall me. Not even death can dismay or amaze me. Fixed in the certainty of love unchanging, I feel utterly secure, and you, I am a part of you. Now take me to my father. And so, plays like this were often performed on different days, so breaking this into 8 parts and the other, it's perfectly fine. It's, it used to be something expected. Just like nowadays we have TV shows separated. But that's one of the things that happens in that final stage of life. As early as 60, as late as the 70s, the naturally, there are physical things that go along with that the physical and the mental ability declines noticeably, and you realize what you are beyond those abilities, beyond the roles that you used to be able to fulfill. That's part of the reason why people retire, because most people no longer are able in one sense or another to do their jobs. Of course, after, we have the first couple years of life, till 7, till 10, and then puberty, and then we have, independent morality and accountability. We have the 25 to middle age. Then we have the middle age to, to elderly. So I guess that's 8 stages I listed there, but